It was a night just like any other in Villisca, Iowa. June 10th, 1912. A small town where everyone knew everyone, where doors were left unlocked. And the biggest worry was the harvest. The Moore family house on East 2nd Street was quiet. Josiah and Sarah were asleep in their upstairs bedroom, weary after the Sunday school program. Down the hall, their 4 children, Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and little Paul, were tucked into their beds, likely dreaming of the summer morning. In the guest room downstairs, 2 friends, Lena and Ina Stillen, were also resting, having decided to stay the night. 8 people, all safe and asleep. They had nitrogen monoxide, the idea that the darkness outside was alive, watching, waiting. Some say the killer was already inside. Maybe he'd slipped in during the day, hiding in the shadows of the cramped attic, listening to the family's laughter, gripping the heavy axe he had stolen from the Moore's own woodpile. Shortly after midnight, he moves. He navigates the familiar creaks of the old wooden floor, his pulse steady, driven by an incomprehensible evil. His first stop is the master bedroom. He approaches Josiah and Sarah. The blow is swift. The heavy axe, used with brutal force, crushes Josiah's skull while he sleeps. He never wakes. Sarah is next. A muted cry, cut short. The killer doesn't hesitate. He moves down the narrow hallway, room by room, a phantom with a blade. 4 small children, then the 2 visiting girls downstairs, all of them brutally clubbed to death. A savage attack that showed nitrogen monoxide mercy. After the carnage, a chilling detail. He spends time inside. He looks at his work. Then, before leaving, he covers all the mirrors in the house with cloths. He even drapes the victims' faces, as if to ensure their spirits can't see what was done to their bodies, or see him. The dawn arrives, but the Moore house remains dark, dead silent. The sun began to rise over Villisca, but the Moore house remained shrouded in shadow. The curtains were drawn, the doors locked from the inside. Neighbors walked past, oblivious to the horror behind those thin wooden walls. It wasn't until Mary Peckham, the neighbor next door, noticed the eerie silence. No children playing, no smoke from the chimney, just a heavy, suffocating stillness. When the brother of Josiah Moore arrived and forced his way inside, the air itself changed. The smell, metallic and thick. He entered the downstairs bedroom first. He saw them, Lena and Ina Stillinger, 2 innocent girls, tucked under the covers, but their faces were hidden by a gray cloth. He pulled the fabric back and screamed. The scene was a nightmare. Blood was everywhere. On the walls, the ceiling, even the underside of the bed. The axe had done its job with terrifying precision. The town of Villisca was paralyzed with fear. Who could do this? A neighbor? A drifter? Or someone? Or something that had been watching the family for weeks. The investigation began, but so did the strange details. The killer hadn't just murdered them. He had stayed in the house for hours after the crime. He'd even washed his hands in a bowl of bloody water and left a plate of uncooked food on the kitchen table. But the most disturbing find was in the attic. 2 cigarettes, smoked down to the filter, were found near a small hole in the floor, a hole that looked directly down into the parents' bedroom. He had been watching them sleep. The entire town was now a crime scene. Every man was a suspect. Every basement was searched. But as the days turned into weeks, the trail went cold. The killer had vanished into the Iowa mist, leaving behind only the echoes of his axe. But the horror was only beginning, because soon the neighbors started hearing things. The investigation hit a dead end, but the house didn't stay quiet. Weeks turned into months. The floorboards of the Moore house began to groan under the weight of something unseen. Neighbors reported seeing a tall, dark figure standing in the upstairs window, the very room where Josiah and Sarah had met their end. The town of Villisca was haunted by the unknown. Suspects were hauled into the station. A local minister, a regular traveler, even a man who had been seen with an axe in a nearby town. But the evidence was always thin. Each lead turned into a shadow. Each witness turned into a ghost. Then, The reports started coming from inside the house. People who dared to enter felt a sudden, chilling drop in temperature. The smell of old blood would fill the kitchen even after the floors had been scrubbed 1,000 times. And the sounds, the heavy, rhythmic thud of an axe hitting wood, echoing from the attic in the dead of night. The house became a monument to murder. But the most terrifying part? The mirrors. Even years later, visitors would find the mirrors covered in cloth. If they uncovered them, they claimed to see a face behind their own reflection, a face with hollow eyes, and a grip on a blood-stained handle. The killer was never caught. He took his secrets to the grave, or perhaps he never left the house at all. To this day, the Villisca Axe Murder House stands as a reminder. Some say if you stay the night, you can hear the faint sound of children whispering in the dark. Is he gone yet? Is he still in the attic? Pause. But the answer is always the same. The voice you selected does not support this language. Please click the upper right corner to switch to another voice. The house still stands on East 2nd Street, a skeletal remains of a forgotten era. It's now a tourist attraction for the brave or the foolish. Visitors pay to stay the night. They bring their cameras, their recorders, and their courage, but they usually leave before dawn. They report the same things. The sound of children's footsteps running down the hallway, stopping right at the master bedroom door. The feeling of a cold hand pressing against their back. The voice you selected does not support this language. Please click the upper right corner to switch to another voice. A paranormal investigator was found in the house. He was stabbed in the chest. A self-inflicted wound? Or did the house finally find a new victim? The police had no answers. The house kept its secrets. Once again, some believe the killer's soul is trapped within those walls, forever reliving that midnight massacre. Others say the children are still waiting for their parents to wake up. But the most chilling report comes from those who dare to look into the attic. They see a pair of eyes, glowing in the dark corner. The same corner where those 2 cigarettes were found a century ago. The same corner where someone, or something, waited for the house to fall silent. If you ever visit Villisca, don't look at the mirrors. Don't go into the attic alone, because once you enter, the door might lock itself, and you'll realize you aren't the only one in the room. The axe is still there, waiting for the next strike. Sleep tight. It began in 1817, in the quiet hills of Adams, Tennessee. John Bell was a respected farmer, a family man, living a peaceful life on his large estate. But peace was about to become a luxury he could no longer afford. It started with a strange sighting. John was walking through his cornfield when he saw a bizarre creature, a dog with the head of a rabbit. He fired his gun, but the animal vanished into thin air. That was the trigger. Soon, the house began to echo with sounds that defied logic. Scratching on the outside walls, the sound of a giant dog clawing at the wooden boards. Then, it moved inside. The family sat in terror as they heard the sound of heavy objects being dragged across the floor, stones being dropped from the ceiling, and the rhythmic thumping of something unseen against their bedroom doors. But this wasn't just a haunting. This was an attack. The children felt their blankets being ripped off in the middle of the night. Their hair was pulled by invisible hands. Little Betsy Bell, the youngest daughter, suffered the most. She would wake up with red welts on her face, screaming that she had been slapped by something in the dark. Then, the most terrifying thing happened. The spirit began to speak. At first, it was just a faint whisper, a low growl in the corner of the room. But slowly, it grew into a clear, high-pitched female voice. It began to quote scripture, sing hymns, and mock the family's prayers. The news spread like wildfire. People traveled from all over the country to witness the bell, which even Andrew Jackson, the future president of the United States, came to investigate. But as he approached the property, his wagon wheels froze. The horses couldn't move, as if an invisible wall had been built across the road. A voice laughed from the bushes. "All right, Genera, let the wagon move on." Suddenly, the horses bolted. Jackson left the next morning, terrified. He later said, "I would rather fight the entire British army than face the Bell Witch for one more night." But the spirit wasn't finished with John Bell. It had a specific target, a deadly goal. The entity made a chilling promise. It whispered into the darkness, "I will not stop until John Bell is dead." The spirit was no longer just a shadow in the corner. It was a constant, vicious presence. Night after night, it tormented the house. It knew everyone's secrets, whispering things into their ears that only they should know. But the entity's hatred for John Bell grew stronger every day. It called him Old Jack, and it cursed his name until the walls seemed to shake. John's health began to fail. He suffered from strange facial tics. His tongue would swell, making it impossible for him to swallow or speak. He was being wasted away by an invisible force. Then came the winter of 1820. On a cold December morning, John Bell fell into a deep, unnatural sleep. He wouldn't wake up. His breath was shallow, his face pale. His son went to the medicine cabinet to find his father's tonic, but instead, he found a strange, dark vial, a liquid that nitrogen monoxide, one recognized. The family called for the doctor to test the mystery liquid. They gave a single drop to the family cat. Within seconds, the animal went into convulsions and died. Suddenly, a voice erupted in the room, high-pitched, mocking, triumphant. The Bell Witch was laughing. "I put it there," the voice shrieked. "I gave Old Jack a big dose of it last night, and it fixed him." The family watched in horror as John Bell took his last ragged breath. The spirit had kept its promise. It had murdered the master of the house in front of his own children. But the cruelty didn't end at his death. At the funeral, as hundreds of people gathered to pay their respects, the air was filled with a chilling sound. The spirit wasn't mourning. It was singing. It sang loud, joyous drinking songs, drowning out the prayers of the minister. The witch remained at the farm for another year, focusing its malice on Betsy Bell. It broke off her engagement, drove away her suitors, and controlled her every move. Finally, it made one last announcement. "I am leaving now," the voice whispered, "but I will return in 7 years." True to its word, it came back. It spoke to John Belger, predicting the future, talking about wars that had not yet happened, and a world that would eventually go mad. Then, it vanished again, but it left behind a warning. It said it would return one more time, 100 years later, in 1935. Many believe it never left at all. Today, the Bell Farm's gone, but the land still reeks of the supernatural. The focus of the terror has shifted to a dark, jagged opening in the earth, known as the Bell Witch Cave. Local legends say when the spirit left the house, it took refuge in the darkness of those limestone walls. Visitors who dare to enter the cave report a heavy, crushing sensation on their chests. Cameras malfunction, flashlights flicker and die, leaving explorers in total suffocating blackness. Some have heard a woman's voice, whispering their names from the back of the cavern, where no one is standing. The voice you selected does not support this language. Please click the upper right corner to switch to another voice. But the most chilling warnings come from those who try to take a piece of the cave home. There is a curse on the rocks of the Bell Witch Cave. Those who have pocketed a small stone as a souvenir report. String of sudden, violent misfortunes, car accidents, mysterious illnesses, houses catching fire. They always end up sending the rocks back by mail, accompanied by desperate letters, begging for forgiveness. Nearby, the old Bell family cemetery remains a place of deep unease. Locals avoid the area after sunset. They say you can still see a strange, black animal prowling near the graves. An animal that doesn't bark and doesn't leave tracks. The legend of the Bell, which is not just a story from the 1800s. It is a living, breathing nightmare. It remains the only documented case in United States history where a spirit was officially recognized as the cause of a human being's death. John Bell is long gone. His house is dust. But the entity remains. Is it waiting for another 100-year cycle? Is it watching the descendants of the Bell family? Waiting for the right moment to strike again? One thing is certain. In the quiet woods of Adams, Tennessee, you are never truly alone. If you hear a whisper in the wind or a laugh coming from the shadows, do not answer, just run. The mystery of the Bell Witch didn't end with a death. It evolved into a legacy of silence. For generations, those who knew the truth were too terrified to speak. They feared that even mentioning her name would bring the malice back to their doorstep. But secrets this dark have a way of clawing their way to the surface. In the mid-1900s, a mysterious manuscript was discovered. It contained the eyewitness accounts of those who saw John Bell wither away, those who heard the spirit sing at his grave. The details were even more brutal than the legend suggested. The writings describe the spirit not just as a ghost, but as a shifting darkness. It could be in 3 places at once. It could speak in multiple voices, sometimes sounding like a sweet young girl, other times like a demonic beast. But the most haunting part of the legacy is the witch's hole. Deep inside the cave, there is a crevice so narrow that no human can fit through it. Locals claim that if you lean your ear against the cold stone, you can hear the sound of a woman humming a slow, rhythmic tune, like a mother putting a child to sleep. But she isn't comforting anyone. She is waiting. Paranormal investigators, with modern equipment, have captured EVP recordings that defy explanation. Clear, chilling sentences. I am here. I never left. Who is next? To this day, the town of Adams remains under a shadow. People still report seeing a woman in an old-fashioned dress walking through the cornfields at twilight. When they approach her, she turns, and her face is nothing but a blank white void. The Bell Witch remains the ultimate mystery. Was she a vengeful neighbor, a demonic entity, or a curse born from the very soil of Tennessee? We may never know the truth, but one thing is guaranteed. If you visit the cave and you feel a sudden, icy breath against your neck, don't turn around, because once she sees your face, she never forgets. The Bell Witch is always listening. The NH-17, the Mumbai-Goa Highway, to thousands of travelers. It is a scenic route through the lush green forests of the Konkan. But to the locals, it is a corridor of death. This isn't just about sharp turns or dangerous cliffs. There is something evil lurking in the shadows of the old trees that line this road. For decades, legends have whispered of a coven of ruthless witches. They don't want your money. They don't want your car. They want your flesh. The warning is passed down from every truck driver and local villager. If you are driving on NH-17 after midnight, never carry non-vegetarian food. No chicken, no meat, nothing that bleeds. The scent is like a beacon for the unknown. Drivers tell stories of a strange, pale woman standing in the middle of the pitch-black road. You slam on the brakes, but when the dust settles, there is nitrogen monoxide one there. Only the sound of something heavy landing on the roof of your car. A rhythmic, wet, scratching sound. You think you are alone on the road? You look in your rearview mirror, and for a split second, you see a face, but it's not human. It has eyes that glow like embers, and teeth meant for tearing. They say the NH-17 is a covert, a hiding place for an assemblage of spirits that have been hungry for centuries. And at 3 a.m., the highway doesn't belong to the living anymore. It belongs to them. But what happens if you break the rule? What happens if you carry that one piece of meat, and the engine suddenly DS? The silence of the highway is the first warning. One moment, you hear the hum of your engine. The next, it's gone. In the dead of night on NH-17, silence is a sentence. Imagine being stranded near the Kashedi Ghat. The air turns cold, smelling of rotted wood and raw iron. You check your phone. No signal. You check your headlights. They begin to flicker, dying out. Then, the smell hits you. The smell of the meat you packed in the back seat. It's no longer just food. It's a target. Suddenly, the car begins to rock. Not from the wind, but from hands powerful. Invisible hands pressing down on the metal. You hear a whisper from the darkness outside your window. A woman's voice, calling your name. How does she know your name? You keep your eyes locked on the road ahead, but something taps on the glass. You look and see a woman dressed in white. She isn't standing on the ground. She is hovering, her feet inches above the asphalt. Her neck is twisted at an impossible angle, and she is pointing at your back seat. She isn't alone. From the shadows of the forest, more figures emerge, pale, thin, crawling on all fours like animals. The ruthless witches of the NH-17 have found their meal. The scratching on the roof grows louder. The metal begins to groan, as if a heavy weight is trying to peel the car open like a can. You realize the locals weren't joking. The meat wasn't for you. It was a sacrifice. And now, they want the one who brought it. The panic sets in. Your heart is hammering against your ribs like a trapped bird. You reach for the ignition, turning the key with white-knuckled desperation. The engine coughs, sputters, but stays dead. Outside, the scratching on the roof stops. That's when you hear it. A soft, wet rhythm on the hood of the car. A figure is crouching there. She is thin, skeletal, with hair that looks like tangled vines. Her skin is the color of a She leans forward, her face pressing against the windshield. Her jaw drops open, wider than any human jaw should go, revealing rows of jagged, yellowed teeth. She isn't looking at the food anymore. She is looking at you. Suddenly, the back window shatters. Shards of glass fly everywhere. You scream, diving toward the floorboards. But the smell of the meat is replaced by something worse. The stench of the grave. A cold, slimy hand grips your shoulder. The strength is unreal. You're being pulled, dragged toward the broken window. You grab the steering wheel, praying, crying, begging for mercy. But the witches of NH-17 don't know mercy. They only know hunger. Then, out of the darkness, a pair of bright lights appears in the distance. A truck, a massive, heavy-duty freighter is roaring down the highway, its horn blaring like a war cry. The grip on your shoulder vanishes. The weight on the hood lifts. The figures melt back into the trees, faster than the eye can follow. By the time the truck pulls over, the road is empty. But as you look at your shoulder, you see 4 deep, bloody claw marks. And in the back seat, the meat you were carrying is gone. Not eaten, but ripped to shreds, as if by 1,000 tiny knives. The sun rises over the Conchone, but the nightmare of NH-17 never truly fades. You survive the night, but you are changed. You look at every hitchhiker, every woman standing by the road, and you wonder, was that her? Is she still watching? The locals say the claw marks on your shoulder will never fully heal. They are a mark, a brand left by the witches to remind you that you owe them. Truck drivers who frequent this route tell a final, chilling secret. They say if you look closely at the trees near the Kashadi Ghat, you will see old clothes hanging from the branches, saris, shirts, children's toys. These are not discarded items. These are the remains of those who didn't have a truck to save them, those who carried meat and paid with their lives. Today, the highway has been widened. There are more lights, more petrol pumps, but the darkness between the lamps is still absolute. Even now, if your car breaks down after midnight, the first thing a local mechanic will ask you isn't about your battery or your fuel. He will look into your back seat, sniff the air, and ask one question: did you bring the meat? If the answer is yes, he won't help you. He will lock his doors and drive away, because on NH-17, the witches don't just hunt the meat, they hunt anyone who stands in their way. So, if you are planning a trip to HOA, enjoy the beaches Enjoy the sun. But when the clock strikes 12 and the forest of the NH-17 begins to close in, keep your windows rolled up, keep your eyes on the road, and for the love of God, stay a vegetarian until the sun comes up, because out there, in the dead of night, you are the only fresh flesh on the road. Drive safe.